Good afternoon, ministers. Good afternoon, everybody else. My name is JP Tasker from CBC News, and I'll be the moderator for today's press conference. Before we get underway, I just have to read some comments about preventing audio-related injuries, so just bear with me while I get through this. To prevent disruptive and potentially harmful audio feedback incidents that can cause injuries, we remind all in-person participants to keep their earpieces away from all microphones at all times. When you are not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the middle of the sticker for this purpose that you will find on the table. Please consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. Thank you all for your cooperation. So we have with us here today Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne, Housing Minister Fraser, and Families Minister Jenna Sudds, who will provide an update on their plan for Canada's economy. Ministers, please, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks everyone for being here. Bonjour. Je parlerai tout d'abord de la loi d'exécution du budget qui sera présentée cette semaine à la Chambre des communes. Je céderai ensuite la parole au ministre Fraser qui présentera en détail les mesures prévues dans la loi d'exécution du budget pour aider à rendre le logement plus abordable. Un enjeu très important pour nous tous. La ministre Jenna Sudds parlera ensuite des mesures visant à renforcer le filet de sécurité sociale du Canada. Enfin, mon collègue, le ministre François-Philippe Champagne, présentera des mesures visant à rendre la vie plus abordable pour les Canadiennes et les Canadiens. This morning, I tabled the notice of Ways and Means motion for the Budget Implementation Act, which would put into effect many key measures from this year's budget. Our budget and the measures outlined in the Budget Implementation Act is about ensuring fairness for every generation. Because today, too many young Canadians feel as though the deck is stacked against them. They can get a good job, they can work hard, but far too often, the reward of a secure, prosperous, comfortable middle-class life remains out of reach. We want the hard work of young Canadians to be rewarded. And that's why we are acting now, with purpose, to build a Canada that works for younger Canadians. A Canada where they can get ahead and where they know that their hard work will pay off. That's why our budget includes a plan to help make homes more affordable by helping Millennial and Gen Z Canadians afford a home with more tax-free ways to save for that first down payment. We're also putting more homes back on the market by cracking down on short-term rentals and by banning foreign buyers of Canadian homes. We're making life cost less, and we're strengthening Canada's social safety net for every generation, from diabetes and contraceptive medication being made free to Canadians, to launching a new national school food program, to making switching internet and phone plans easier and more affordable. De plus, nous augmentons les investissements et la productivité. Nous encourageons le type d'innovation qui va changer la donne et qui va permettre de créer des emplois valorisants et bien payés, et ce, en maintenant le Canada à l'avant-scène de l'économie. Nous agissons dès maintenant. Sinon, ce sont surtout les jeunes Canadiennes et Canadiens qui paieront le coût de notre inaction. Et nous ne les laisserons pas pour compte. C'est pourquoi j'implore mes collègues parlementaires d'adopter le plus rapidement possible la loi d'exécution du budget. Les jeunes Canadiennes et Canadiens en ont besoin. We know there are some, like the Conservative leader, who don't share our vision. He has already said he will vote against this budget. That means he's voting against helping younger Canadians become homeowners. That means he's going to vote against our national school food program, which will help 400,000 more Canadian children have something to eat and not be going to school hungry. He is against helping Canadians get cheaper internet and phone plans. And he's certainly against asking those who are doing the best in our society to pay a little bit more. Because ultimately, he believes that the job of government is to do little, then less, and ultimately as close as possible to nothing at all. Soyons honnêtes sur ce que l'austérité et la réduction de l'État signifieraient pour les Canadiennes et les Canadiens. Cela voudrait dire que vous auriez à vous débrouiller par vous-même. Ce n'est pas la façon de faire du Canada. Ici, nous prenons soin les uns des autres. Aujourd'hui, nous nous tournons vers nos jeunes générations et vers ceux qui soucient d'elles pour leur dire « Nous mettons toute la capacité du gouvernement à votre service. Ensemble, nous allons ouvrir la porte de la classe moyenne à plus de Canadiennes et de Canadiens. Et nous allons renouveler la promesse de notre merveilleux pays. » Merci. And I'll now hand it over to my colleague, Minister Fraser.
Excellent, merci tout le monde. C'est un plaisir d'être ici pour discuter des budgets et des investissements d'améliorer la situation pour du logement pour tout notre pays. There's a couple of measures that I want to focus on. Perhaps before I get into the specifics, I think it's important to frame this in the context of the housing plan that we've put forward. Our goal is to solve the housing crisis by accomplishing a few different things. The first is to build more homes to cure the supply gap that exists in Canada. But we also have measures that are designed to make it easier to rent or to buy a home for those who are seeking to get into the market, and additional measures that are designed to ensure the most vulnerable who do not have the means to afford a place to live, nevertheless have an opportunity to go to bed with a roof over their head. Today I want to focus on a few key measures that are designed to make it easier to rent or buy in a number of different ways, some of which are included specifically in the Budget Implementation Act that I understand you've had an opportunity to review. It's important to reflect on the fact that although it will take some time to solve the housing crisis, because some of the solutions require us to construct buildings that can take a couple of years to put up, we do have an opportunity to help people in the shorter term, particularly those who are seeking to get into the market. One of the ways that we intend to do that is to focus on some of the challenges that people are facing who are trying to get into the market for the first time. There's a few bottlenecks through conversations we've had, particularly with young people across Canada, that we've identified. It includes the opportunity to build a credit score. It includes the challenges with saving up for a down payment, and it includes the monthly mortgage costs that a person will run into should they be in a position to buy their first home. In order to build up a credit score, we're changing the Canadian Mortgage Charter and embracing consumer-directed finance to allow people to use their rent history to establish a credit score. This is going to help people who may not have established a credit to date, perhaps because they're young, they don't have a series of different markers in their credit history that proves their creditworthiness, despite the fact that they pay their rent on time every month. The second piece of this is helping people save up for a down payment. We've discussed before the First Home Savings Account, which has now seen more than 750,000 people save up for a down payment for the first time. The Budget Implementation Act is going to add a complementary measure by changing the RRSP home buyers plan, by extending the value of a withdrawal from an RRSP a person can make for the purpose of purchasing their home, to increase it to $60,000, and importantly increase the grace period before they need to start repaying that back to 5 years. This is going to create an opportunity for more people to save up for that down payment. And of course, as you're well aware by this point in time, we're working on changes to the amortization period for people who are buying a new home to extend their ability to pay that off over 30 years as opposed to 25. This is going to reduce the monthly mortgage costs for somebody who's getting into the market, knowing that we've now put supports in place both to help build credit and to save for a down payment, but also to reduce the cost over time. In addition to the measures that will help in individual save up to buy for their first home. We're introducing new measures that are going to make it easier for people to compete in the market by reducing pressure for stock that already exists. There's a number of different strategies that we're deploying to achieve this end. For example, the Budget Implementation Act will implement changes that will deny certain tax benefits to people running short-term rental enterprises that don't comply with municipal or provincial laws. There have been jurisdictions in different parts of the world, perhaps most notably New York City, that have implemented changes to this effect and had the opportunity in a very short period of time to free up tens of thousands of new housing units on the market that were previously being rented out for a few days at a time, rather than providing a home to families for the long term. In addition to the tax measures around short-term rentals, through the fall economic statement, we're also going to be investing $50 million to help communities that have actually implemented measures enforce them. Enforcement is going to be a key challenge we need to overcome if we're going to actually realize the results from this measure. We've also made a decision to extend the foreign buyers ban by 2 years to ensure that speculative investments from people who are not Canadian and who don't live in Canada reduce pressure in the marketplace. And we'll be working on additional measures that will help reduce competition in the market from a buyer's point of view, including by tackling mortgage fraud, by introducing new measures to better verify a person's income to ensure they're not obtaining inflated mortgages beyond what they should be able to afford. And we will be launching a consultation to prevent large corporate investors from buying up single-family homes for the purpose of hosting a speculative investment. There's additional measures that will allow us to get more out of the properties that we already have, including by introducing low-cost loans for people who own a home that wish to add a garden suite or secondary suite. There's a lot we need to do to solve the housing crisis. Some of it will take more time than others, but the measures that we're introducing through the Budget Implementation Act and related measures are going to make it easier for people to help save up for a home today and relieve some of the pressure that exists in the market by tackling some of the challenges that increase competition amongst buyers for stock that already exists. With that, I've committed a cardinal sin and forget who I'm supposed to hand the microphone off to. It's Jenna. Okay, yeah, j'ai passé la parole à ma collègue Jenna. Merci.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. Le budget 2024 a un objectif clair, l'équité pour chaque génération. This means building more affordable homes and supporting renters. It means supporting small businesses and future entrepreneurs, and it means helping parents who feel stress every day as they raise their kids in the current economy. L'épicerie peut coûter cher, et pour certains, il n'est pas toujours possible d'envoyer leur enfant à l'école avec un repas complet. We've set out to change that because everyone deserves a fair chance at success. Through Budget 2024, our government has committed $1 billion to create a national school food program. This program truly has the potential to change lives and to increase access to school meals for up to 400,000 additional children. We've seen some provinces and territories make investments already in school food. However, we know that there is still a gap to be filled. We cannot duplicate the work, but we must expand on this work. That's why we'll work with the provinces, territories, and Indigenous partners to support the expansion of school food programs across the country. Les partenariats sont essentiels pour le succès de ce travail. Ils nous aideront à créer un programme qui renforcera les efforts déjà commencés par les provinces et les territoires offrant des aliments sains, locaux et durables à plus d'enfants. We're making an investment in Canada's future. And as the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, I'm committed to ensuring that no child in Canada goes hungry while at school. Notre gouvernement investit dans les gens. C'est pourquoi nous avons mis en place la protection canadienne aux enfants, des services de garde d'enfants à $10 par jour et le régime canadien de soins dentaires. C'est aussi pourquoi nous créons le programme national d'alimentation scolaire. We've made incredible progress in supporting parents, particularly women and children. Yet not everyone shares these priorities, these values, and it is worrisome. The progress that we have made is too important to leave in the hands of the Conservative Party. The leader of the opposition has already made his plan clear. He is committed to voting against Budget 2024 and in turn is committing to cutting essential programs that support families across the country. There's too much at stake, but we won't be distracted. We'll remain focused on supporting all Canadians, making life cost less and growing an economy that is shared by every generation. Cela veut dire offrir aux enfants le meilleur départ possible dans la vie. Et cela veut dire être là pour donner de l'aide aux parents lorsqu'ils en ont besoin. C'est ce que les Canadiens veulent et ce que notre gouvernement s'engage de faire. Nous serons là pour vous. That's what Canadians expect, and it's what our government is committed to do. We will be there to have your back. And with that, I will pass it to my colleague, Minister Champagne.
Merci. Bonjour tout le monde. J'espère que vous allez bien. Je suis ici aujourd'hui avec mes collègues pour souligner quelques mesures importantes du récent budget qui a été déposé par ma collègue, la ministre Freeland, qui sont importantes pour les consommateurs et les consommatrices à travers le pays. Des mesures qui sont destinées à rendre la vie plus abordable, des mesures qui répondent à ce que les gens nous ont dit au cours des derniers mois, certainement des dernières semaines. Et entre autres, évidemment, je veux revenir sur les factures de téléphone et d'Internet qui sont encore trop élevées à travers le pays. We have heard you and you spoke loud and clear. You told us you wanted more options in the market, in the telecom market in Canada. So we fought to add a fourth national player to increase competition and give you more choices. Because at the end of the day, we know that that's why with Minister Freeland, we have also, in addition to these measures, we have pushed, I think, the broadest set of measures to reform competition in this country since we had a Competition Act, because we know that more choice lead to better prices, and that's what we want to see in every sector of our economy. You told us there were too many constraints when dealing with providers, and so we included measures in the last budget presented by Minister Freeland that would address just that. First, going forward, we are going to make sure carriers are required to help identify plans, which may well be including lower cost plans in advance of the end of a contract. So a lot of the things we've seen from Canadians is that we have these plans for our phones or internet providers at home, but many of us do not check necessarily on a weekly basis whether there's additional plans that would be offered. And one of the things that I've seen in different jurisdictions is that, and I can talk for in the province of Quebec, I've seen that when it comes to electricity bill, is that the provider is informing you if there's new tariffs or new options for consumers. So then you can make an informed decision as to whether you want to stick with what you have or you'd want to move to another plan, which I think information is key in a market like that, where if you want to make better choices, well, the first thing we need to do is to make sure Canadians, we have the information to make these choices. Alors, l'approche que nous avons commencé a déjà porté fruit, je pourrais dire, à l'échelle du pays. Si vous regardez l'étude de Wall Communications, vous allez voir, on l'a rendu public aujourd'hui. Donc, une étude qui a été commandée qui évidemment touche à la tarification sur les télécommunications et ça a été publié aujourd'hui. Ce que l'étude vous montre, dans un sens, c'est que les prix ont baissé en moyenne de 18,2 % pour les forfaits de données en 2023. Je le répète, les prix ont baissé en moyenne de 18,2 % en 2023. Mais évidemment, je le dirais, comme vous me connaissez, ce n'est qu'un début, parce qu'on est conscient que les Canadiens, que les consommateurs, que nos familles, on consomme de plus en plus de données. Alors évidemment, c'est un pas dans la bonne direction, mais on est tous conscients que les factures d'Internet, de cellulaire sont encore trop élevées au Canada. Second thing, no fee switching. No fee switching to cheaper plans. And that is something that has been aggravating for many, many Canadians. In the sense, if you want to switch to a lower plan, you should be able to do that without penalty. So let me give you an example. If you're on a plan currently at $65 a month, but you come across a promotional deal that has been advertised, which offers you all the same features, but with another carrier, you will be able to secure a new contract and switch carriers without extra fees. That's obviously conditional, like the Deputy Prime Minister was saying, on passing the Budget Implementation Act, obviously. So I would invite everyone who's watching at home today, if you want to be benefiting from that, you should probably call one of the Conservative members to tell them that you would want to avail yourself of these new tools that will be legislated, because we understand that's the best way to do that. So we want fair prices, we want to increase transparency, and certainly we want more flexibility. Those are the key words: fairness, increased transparency, and flexibility. That's what we're focusing on when it comes to mobile services in this country. Even though the cost for data has gone down, as the study's shown, the way we work and use phones means that we're signing up for bigger packages. So like I said, this is a step in the right direction. Directionally, we're going where we need to be, but obviously much more work needs to be done. Canadian consumers shouldn't feel stuck with the plan they currently have. That's why I encourage everyone to go out and see what's out there. I know some people, for example, who did. And guess what? They found a much cheaper plan that was offering even more data. So that's why these measures are very relevant to me, because more information, more transparency will lead to better choices, obviously, because I can tell you, you really have to dig deeper or to look very carefully to see whether the plan you have is the best plan for you and your family. But I think with the measures that we're putting forward with the Minister of Finance is going to give Canadians the tools they need in order to make a better choice or informed decision. It's clear that more transparency will help consumer make the right choice. One thing that people at home should know is that we will always fight for you to get the best deal possible and a fair deal, and helping you to make better choices to lower your cost of living. And this is my commitment, it's the commitment of all my colleagues. Affordability is front and center in everything we're doing, and we're going to keep fighting for you each and every day. Merci.
Thank you, ministers. Okay, we'll now turn to the question portion of this press conference. Please keep your questions and answers reasonably short so that we can reduce frustrations, I guess we can call it, among everybody. And we want to get as many in before the ministers have to leave for question period. So just be mindful of that on both sides. And we'll start, please, with Greg Quinn at Market News International. You have the first question.
Question for Minister Fraser. I noticed looking at the CMHC's website that there's an acting CEO, there's an acting board chair, there's also vacancies on the board of directors. As a fine son of Nova Scotia, I think you might agree that no captain would sail ship into a storm without a full crew. How are you so confident in your plan when the housing agency is so understaffed?
Look, thanks very much. So let's not pretend that there hasn't been continuity, and let me take this opportunity to thank those who've been serving on the board, both as chair with Derek Ballantyne. Romy Bowers obviously left a number of months ago, but we've been capably served with Michelle stepping in, who I've remained in touch with constantly to sort out some of the challenges. We do expect permanent appointments, to be filled imminently, and we are working to ensure that there's continuity during this period of transition. But rest assured, the folks who have been serving capably during this interim period in that capacity are extremely knowledgeable, extremely professional, but I do look forward in the months ahead to share news about the new permanent appointees who will be filling those key positions.
Thank you. If I could follow with Minister Freeland, looking back at what's going on with the large rise in immigration to fill needs in the labor market, we also know that there are populations in Canada that have struggled to get into the job market, differently abled people, Indigenous people. Is there anything the government can do to shift and diversify where Canadians can hire from instead of relying on bringing people in from other countries?
Look, there's a lot of elements in there in that question. And let me start by saying Canada is a country that has been built by immigration. And one of our great strengths, both socially and economically, is we are a country that is able to welcome new Canadians at a time when countries around the world are facing real demographic challenges that are imposing real economic constraints. That is a national strength. Having said that, our ability to successfully welcome new Canadians depends crucially on having the right balance between the amount of homes we can build and the number of people who are in Canada. And that's why our government, in addition to having a really strong plan, we've just heard Sean talking about, that we tabled in the budget to get nearly 4 million homes built, a huge number. We're also very mindful that we need to be sure that there is a balance between number of homes we're building and number of people who are coming to Canada. And that's why some of the measures you've seen us taking in recent months have been so important, like the limit on international students. People were being invited to Canada and really being exploited, like the change to the Mexican visa requirement, like putting a cap on the number of temporary residents. We think there is more work to do in an area that I think you alluded to, which is temporary foreign workers. So that's kind of high level. And I certainly agree with the premise of your question, that one of the things that we need to be doing, and which we are doing very, very energetically, is working hard to be sure that all Canadians who want to work are equipped with the tools to have a job and have a good life here in Canada. And that definitely includes creating more opportunities for young Canadians, creating more opportunities for groups that have been traditionally excluded. And there was a lot of support in the budget for creating apprenticeship opportunities, work placement opportunities for young Canadians and for excluded groups. That's definitely work we need to keep on doing.
Murad Hamadi, The Logic.
Minister Freeland, the capital gains changes aren't in the Ways and Means motion. Is that because you're considering changes to the proposal in the budget?
We are very committed to the capital gains measures that we put forward in the budget. And let me explain why. Our budget was a budget for fairness for every generation, with a particular focus on unlocking the promise of Canada for younger Canadians, for millennials and Gen Z. And we recognize that we have to make significant investments in order to do that. Massive investments in housing to get 4 million homes built and to make it easier for younger Canadians to afford their rent or to buy that first home. And we've just heard Sean talking about that. We believe that we need to make really significant investments in affordability. Some of the things we've just heard Jenna talking about, some of the things we've heard François-Philippe talking about. And we believe we need to make investments in growth and productivity. You know all about those, you've been covering them. Things like our major investments, $5 billion in research, in graduate research, in students, things like our AI investment. And we knew that even as we needed to make those investments, we needed to do it in a fiscally responsible way. We stuck to our 3 guideposts that we laid out in the fall economic statement. We have maintained the lowest debt and deficit in the G7. The Governor of the Bank of Canada has been explicit that that is helpful for him in the fight against inflation, which means it's helpful in something I think we all know is so important, which is for interest rates to be able to come down. So we needed to pay for these essential investments. And our view is it is absolutely fair to ask those in our country who are at the very top to contribute a little bit more. And that is why we put forward a plan, which we are absolutely committed to increasing the capital gains inclusion rate. We were explicit about that plan in the budget, including details in the tax annex. And I look forward to tabling implementing legislation.
Follow up.
So, Minister Champagne, this morning the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development tabled a report on the Strategic Innovation Fund Net Zero Accelerator. And his conclusion was that the NZA has failed to attract applications from most of the country's largest industrial emitters, and that your department hasn't secured specific emissions reduction commitments in more than 2/3 of the contracts with the companies that are receiving the funding. How can we have confidence that the SIF NZA will produce the emissions reductions that it's intended to, given those circumstances?
Well, listen, let me first of all, let's say I appreciate the work, obviously, of the commissioner, but I don't share necessarily all the conclusions that he has drawn. To be honest, the Prime Minister of Canada has set Canada on a course to be the green supplier of choice to the world. I can tell you, I just come from a G7 meeting, or even in my engagement with the United States, we're producing green steel, green aluminum. We're looking at green batteries. We're talking about greening the semiconductor industry. I would say we're the envy of the world when it comes to our mission to make sure that we would be the manufacturing hub of choice in a decarbonized economy. And you don't need to take it from me. I would just bring you back to an announcement, which I think you covered last week, where we saw the single largest investment in the auto sector in Canada's history. The single largest investment by a private company in Canada, $15.7 billion, and the single largest investment by Honda in its history of $15.7 billion in our country. I would say that if you look more specifically to the conclusion drawn by the commissioner, there's 3 pillars in the NZA and in our approach. One of them was to build a full battery ecosystem in Canada. I would refer you to the mandate that was given. I think you don't need to take it from me, but you may know about Bloomberg. Bloomberg ranked Canada first in the world now for the battery ecosystem, ahead of China for the next 30 years because of what we've built. And I can tell you, there's always 5 things that bring people to this country. And Minister Freeland alluded to that. It's the talent of our people. We have the best workers in the world. It's the strong ecosystem we have built. And you don't need to take it from me, but you've covered all the investment we've seen, for example, in the electric vehicle space. The fact that we have proximity to critical minerals, renewable energy, which is attracting people, and obviously access to market. So whilst I appreciate the work of the commissioner, I can tell you, we're going to be, look at the investment of Heidelberg. We're going to be producing green cement. We're going to be the first country in the world. Look at Dow Chemical, the largest investment in their history in Fort Saskatchewan. That's going to be the first green polyethylene plant in the world. Look at BHP's activity with potash. I can tell you, when I look at the score that we have in terms of attracting foreign direct investment, I think the numbers speak for themselves. So I will be happy to engage with the commissioner.
Raymond Filion, TVA, à vous la parole.
Bonjour, merci. Question pour M. Champagne au sujet de l'arrêt du chantier de Ford à Bécancour. Est-ce que vous connaissez la raison de l'arrêt et pour combien de temps ça risque d'être à l'arrêt?
Très bonne question. Comme vous savez, je connais bien Bécancour. Je passe devant à peu près toutes les semaines. Alors, première chose, on suit la situation de très près. J'ai été en contact avec les dirigeants de Ford du côté de Détroit pour bien comprendre la situation. Et comme nos collègues de Québec l'ont indiqué, je pense au ministre Fitzgibbon, ce qu'on comprend, c'est un choix technologique. C'est-à-dire qu'on est dans une phase de la construction, on doit faire des choix technologiques. On l'a toujours indiqué que les grandes usines qu'on avait attirées au pays s'adapteraient aux technologies qui pourraient être développées pour les batteries. Alors, ce qu'on comprend présentement, c'est que le délai est relié au choix de technologie. Et ça aura un impact, évidemment, sur le type d'équipement qu'on aura besoin dans l'usine. Mais évidemment, comme tout le monde, on espère que ce délai-là soit le plus court possible. Et c'est exactement le type d'intervention qu'on fait auprès de Ford présentement.
Donc, c'est aucunement remis en question, si je vous comprends bien. Là.
Écoutez, les indications qu'on a de la compagnie, c'est sur le choix technologique. Et je vous dirais que les usines de Bécancour, non seulement sont importantes, mais sont stratégiques pour l'ensemble des usines de Ford en Amérique du Nord. C'est comme ça qu'on s'est inséré dans la chaîne d'approvisionnement. C'est comme ça qu'on a fait entrer le Québec même dans l'industrie automobile. Alors, évidemment, on va continuer de travailler avec Ford, mais vous savez, quand on fait des changements technologiques aussi importants que ceux-là, des fois, il y a des moments comme ceux-là où il y a une pause, mais la destination est claire, on s'en va vers les véhicules électriques.
Najoud Al-Maliz, Canadian Press.
Hi, Minister Freeland. I'm wondering if you explain why the capital gains tax changes are not included in the legislation.
I think I answered that question, but let me go for it again. So, again, let me be really clear. The purpose of our budget, the central goal of our budget, is fairness for every generation. It is recognizing that we need to unlock the promise of Canada for millennials and Gen Z. And it's recognizing we need to make significant investments to do that. We have launched the most serious investment in housing and home building, certainly since the Second World War, a plan to build 4 million homes that Sean has been talking about. We know we need to support affordability for all Canadians with things like the investments in the social safety net that Jenna has been talking about, the investments in competition that François-Philippe has been talking about, and we need to invest in the economic capacity of our country. All of that costs money, and we also recognize how important it is to do this in a fiscally responsible way. And so we are paying for these essential investments in Canada and Canadians by increasing the capital gains inclusion rate. We were specific in the budget that I tabled on April 16th on what we would be doing and how. We included details in the tax annex, and I do look forward to tabling legislation to implement those changes. It's probably worth underscoring as well that the entry into force date, as we said in the budget, is June 25th.
That doesn't answer the question, but I will move on to Minister Champagne. Minister, shoppers are mobilizing online to boycott Loblaws in May, and I'm wondering if you support that.
Well, listen, I've always said that, the large chain in Canada should be listening not only to me, but to Canadians first and foremost, because obviously people have a choice. That's why I would say with Minister Freeland, one of the most consequential change we've made in this country, despite that the Conservatives were not supporting us, was this reform on competition. Because actually what people want is more choice, which leads to better prices. And that's why you see, I always said to the head of the grocery chains in the country, listen to customers. People are hurting and they want you to be part of, helping them in this particular moment in time. And some of them have done better than others in terms of responding to this call for action that the Prime Minister launched and that we obviously follow up. And at the same time, I've said it and I continue, is to look at whether there would be foreign deep discounters that would be interested in the Canadian market. And I can tell you, and I know it seems anecdotal, but the fact that, for example, we removed now these covenants that you had in leases that prevented competition around a grocer, I can tell you, talking to one, and I won't tell you the city in the U.S. because you'll figure out who it is, but I went to meet them in the United States, and they said, Minister, a few years ago, we looked to enter the Canadian market, but believe it or not, we might be a multi-billion-dollar corporation. We could not find 400 or 500 locations in Canada where people would want us to be. We want Site A, obviously, to attract customers. So he said the fact that you changed the law now is calling for us to review that. And they've been working since then to look at different things. Listen, are we going to succeed? I don't know. Is it worth the effort? Definitely. Are we going to keep on pushing? Surely. So, movements like that you see consumers, I think it's a call for action that says to the big grocery chains, people want to see action and they want to see help. And therefore, I am not surprised to see consumers organizing. We've been supporting a number of consumer, thanks to the funding we had in the budget, a number of consumer organizations to make sure we provide more transparency to Canadians. And we're going to be at it again for the next few months with respect to offering options to Canadians and making sure they have the information to make the right choices. C'était une longue réponse. C'était une longue réponse. There was a lot of passion in that. Let me... écoutez...
Tu peux le faire.
Non, mais oui, tout à fait. Non, écoutez, ce que je disais à votre collègue d'abord, c'est que, vous savez, depuis que j'ai convoqué les grands épiciers ici à Ottawa, je pense que la donne a changé. Vous savez, le ton a changé au niveau national. où là, les gens ont dit, écoutez, on veut voir des choses concrètes, on veut voir de l'action. Comme j'ai dit, une des choses qu'on a faites avec la ministre Freeland, qui était probablement la plus importante, je pense, qui va avoir un impact sur les prochaines générations, c'était vraiment ces changements-là, la loi sur la concurrence au pays. Parce que vous savez, non seulement on a financé différentes organisations qui aident les consommateurs. Vous savez, au Québec, par exemple, on a une grande culture, j'allais dire, de défense des consommateurs. C'est un peu cette culture-là qu'on essaie d'amener à travers le pays en disant, écoutez, on voit la réduflation, la déqualiflation. On a vu certaines pratiques qui, évidemment, dont les consommateurs se sont préoccupés. Et une des choses qu'on a fait, pour vous donner un exemple très concret, je sais que ça peut sembler une anecdote, mais quand j'ai rencontré le PDG d'une des grandes chaînes aux États-Unis, il me disait, « Monsieur le ministre, on a déjà regardé le Canada, mais savez-vous qu'à l'époque, et ça, il y a seulement quelques années, on n'arrivait pas à louer, par exemple, 400 à 500 sites qu'on appelle des sites A, qui sont les sites où on a. Pourquoi? Parce que dans l'écosystème canadien, avant qu'on fasse des changements à la loi sur la concurrence, vous pouviez avoir des clauses qui étaient restrictives. C'est-à-dire que si vous aviez un grand épicier, on empêchait les autres de venir dans un rayon d'action de plusieurs kilomètres. Alors, le fait qu'on a enlevé ça, il m'a dit, Monsieur le ministre, ça nous donne maintenant les éléments pour regarder encore si on voudrait amener nos opérations au Canada. Est-ce qu'on va réussir? Je ne le sais pas. Est-ce que ça vaut la peine de se battre? Tout à fait. Est-ce qu'on va continuer de le faire définitivement? Mais ce groupe, quand je vois des consommateurs qui s'organisent, moi, j'ai toujours dit au PDG, vous pouvez m'écouter, mais vous êtes encore mieux d'écouter les millions de Canadiens et Canadiennes qui, eux, peuvent faire des choix avec l'information qu'on leur donne. Et c'est eux qui vont nous aider à amener plus de transparence, plus de concurrence et des meilleurs prix au pays.
Stephen Hoff, CBC News.
So following up on my colleague, and if you could answer both in French and English, Minister Champagne, you've just fair enough. You've spoken a lot about potentially bringing foreign groceries. You just did foreign grocery chains into Canada. Can you give any specifics on your discussions with companies, and can you explain to Canadians more broadly why you're looking for these sorts of investments?
Because we've seen the impact in other countries. Let me start with the second part of your question. We know that when you bring deep discounters, you change the dynamic in the market. It is pretty unusual for a G7 country to have three large banners that control 50% of the market. To be honest, I don't think it is the case in any other G7 country. So we know that once you bring competition, there's a lot of data that suggests that, when you do that and when you have a new entrant, that put pressure on price because you give more choice, and they bring new supply chains that they're building now. So definitely, why I'm not giving you specifics, I tend to do the work before I do the announcements, so I think it's smart for us to do the work. Is it easy? No. Am I going to succeed? I don't know. But it's worth trying. And therefore, as you would appreciate, these companies would prefer that we keep our discussion confidential for the time being, as we've done with other big investments that we've seen in the country. But at the right moment, I'll update Canadians in due course. Comme je le disais, on a vu de façon historique, quand on amène des nouveaux acteurs dans le marché. Vous savez, le marché canadien est assez unique où on a trois grandes bannières qui contrôlent environ 50% du marché. Je pense que dans les pays du G7, on doit être assez unique dans ce sens-là. Alors, c'est pour ça que pour moi, je trouve ça intéressant parce qu'on sait quand on amène une bannière étrangère, dans d'autres pays, ce qu'on a vu, c'est que ça faisait une pression sur les prix. Parce qu'il y avait plus de choix, ils amenaient une nouvelle chaîne d'approvisionnement. Alors, c'est ça qu'on voudrait voir au pays. Est-ce que je vais réussir? Je ne le sais pas. Est-ce que ça vaut la peine de le faire définitivement? Pourquoi les discussions sont confidentielles? Bien, vous comprenez, parce que ces compagnies-là, ils sont en train de regarder le marché, mais comme dans tous les investissements comme ceux-là, il faut faire le travail d'abord, puis ensuite de ça, s'il y a des annonces à faire, on les fera, mais ça va me faire plaisir de mettre à jour les Canadiens à chaque fois qu'on a la chance de se parler.
And what about other, smaller domestic independent grocery chains? And what is the government doing right now to reduce grocery prices for Canadians?
Well, that's a very good question. I met with the 4,000, the leadership of the 4,900 independent grocers in the country. And you're quite right. We have some, and I'm also interested to explore that with them, which operate more on a regional basis, in BC, same thing in Eastern Canada. So could they extend in other parts of the country? Could their supply chain follow? Because it's pretty complex in terms of supply chain. So obviously, we're looking into that. What we're doing very concretely, thanks to what was in the fall economic statement, we're going back to 2023 now, there were sums that the Minister of Finance have provided us to beef up the Consumer Affairs Bureau, which we're working now with a number of organizations in the country to tackle issues around reduflation, dequaliflation, which are very concerning also for Canadians. The fact that the packages, are the same, but you get much less, or the quality of what you get is less. So that is something of concern. And I've been pushing the provinces to be acting with me on that. I'm very keen. You look at what's going on in France. I'd like to see that in Canada. Now, I can't do it alone federally, but certainly I've been talking to my federal and provincial and territorial colleagues, and I intend to bring that up again because I think we need to see more action nationally.
Marco, High Politics.
Minister Freeland, I just wanted to kind of clear something up. I'm a bit confused because yesterday Jagmeet Singh said one of the remaining sticking points in talks on whether or not to support this budget was on the new disability benefit, specifically some progress that he said was being made on ensuring that it wouldn't be clawed back. I assume this is a reference to insurers. However, when the Senate was dealing with the bill that created the benefit last year, your government rejected an amendment that would explicitly ban insurers from clawing back the benefit, saying it was outside of your hands, it was a matter of provincial jurisdiction. So the NDP is saying, when I raised this point with them, saying that this happened because this government did not want to have a fight with the insurance industry over this bill, and is only possibly reversing course now because they're cowering to pressure from the NDP and want to avoid a snap election. Is that what's happening here?
Certainly not. And let me say a couple of things. On the disability benefit, this is the first time in the history of Canada that a federal government has put forward a disability benefit. That is a milestone. It's a really good thing. It's the right thing to do. It's important to get it right. And it is complicated. It's complicated when it comes to working with provinces and territories. And, when you're laying the foundations for something big, you want to do it properly. We absolutely aspire to do more, and we see this as just the first step, but an important first step. More broadly, when it comes to the NDP, they are extremely capable, our colleagues in the NDP, of speaking for themselves. I will say that I have been having throughout this process really constructive conversations with the NDP finance critic, Don Davies, and I'm grateful to him for his collaboration. And more broadly, this is a really important budget for Canada and Canadians. This is a budget that truly meets the moment, that truly does invest in fairness for every generation. It's a budget that is about meeting the challenges all Canadians are facing, but especially younger Canadians. It's a budget that says right now in Canada, for millennials and Gen Z, you can study hard, you can get a good job, and you can still feel like the kind of middle-class life your parents and grandparents had is out of reach. This budget is a serious, consequential budget squarely addressing that challenge. And it does it in a really honest way by saying we're going to be fiscally responsible as we do it. And so we are going to make our tax system more fair and ask people who are doing the best in our society to contribute a little more. It's a budget all of us are really proud to be standing behind. I think it's a budget everyone in Parliament should be supporting, certainly all progressive members of Parliament. And, I think the question for today is, let's look at what the Conservatives, the Conservatives have been clear. They're voting against it. And let's look at what they're saying they're going to vote against. They are going to vote against the most ambitious housing plan since the Second World War. They're going to vote against a national school food program. They're going to vote against more competition in the grocery sector. And they've tried to be a little cute, frankly, on their position when it comes to capital gains. But they're saying they're going to vote against the budget. And that means that they are voting against tax fairness. They're voting against fairness for every generation. And they, for all their purported populism, they are voting against asking those who are doing a little bit better to help all Canadians who need support.
Quick follow-up.
Sure. Yesterday, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was at the CBTU conference. Minister Champagne, he said he will do everything he can to make sure jobs linked to electric vehicle projects in Canada will stay local. But the CBTU had a pretty, I thought, a simple demand to the Prime Minister, calling on him to take action to get Nexstar to come to the table and negotiate with the CBTU on a new MOU that would guarantee certain workers' levels. If the Prime Minister and this government is truly committed to keeping those jobs local, Mr. Champagne, why not get Nexstar to the table and get an agreement done?
Well, thank you for the question. I obviously support what the Prime Minister said. I met with them this morning as a follow-up to the Prime Minister work. Definitely we're engaging. There's no space between us and CBTU. I've been engaging with Nexstar and also with the CEO of North America of Stellantis to say this is in everyone's best interest, because it's not only during the build-up, but obviously you're going to have operation, maintenance, and upgrades, these investments. But to go back to what the Deputy Prime Minister was saying, what I was saying to them as well, Canadians face a choice. It's great that we have this conversation, because I can tell you, if it was a Conservative government, we would not even have that discussion, because these plants would not be in Canada. Because Pierre Poilievre was very clear with Canadians, and he's trying, like the Deputy Prime Minister, is cuter when he talks to the unions. But at the end of the day, he said he would not have supported the investments that we made, generational investments that are going to create jobs not only now, but for generations to come. Think about Volkswagen, think about Stellantis, think about Honda that we have just announced last week. So let's be clear, I will be maximizing. We're going to be working hard as we always do. But I can tell you, for every pipe fitter, every blue-collar worker in this country, they know who has their back. We have been there at every step of the way. We brought these plants in Canada, and we're going to maximize the jobs for Canadians.
We have just one reporter left, Rachel Haynes, CTV. You want to go?
Okay. Perfect. Thanks, Ministers, for taking our questions. And Minister Freeland, I just want to ask you very specifically, did you separate the capital gains inclusion rate increase from this bill so you can target the Conservatives and force them to vote on this specific issue? No. Okay. All right. I think you gave your reasons otherwise for it, so I'll leave that. But when can we expect this separate legislation then, if you are expecting to meet that target date of June 25th, 2024? When will you be tabling this separate legislation?
So thanks for the question. I do want to be very clear with everyone that, the major elements of the capital gains move were clearly laid out in the budget, including in the tax annex, and we were clear of the entry into force date of June 25th. That was very intentional, and that is a foundation for the budget, a foundation for everything that we're doing today. It's one of the ways that we're able to pay for it by remaining fiscally responsible. I look forward to tabling the implementing legislation, and that's all I'm going to say about that for today.
Can you give any expectation of when that's going to come, if this is such a major plank? How much longer will Canadians have to wait to see that?
Those details, further details in the implementing legislation will be forthcoming. I do want to be clear, though, that there were a lot of specifics in the budget, including in the tax annex, including an entry into force date, and that is and was and continues to be very intentional. That is the government's position. That really is the fiscal foundation for all of the wonderful investments that we've been talking about today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ministers. Thank you, colleagues. That concludes today's press conference. Have a good rest of your day.